All right. Well, yeah, should we get started? And welcome to everybody as you come in and get settled in. Make yourself at home, and we're excited to be with you for the next hour. And as you saw, this webinar is being recorded, so it will be available on our YouTube channel sometime very soon.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just jump in to say that because it's being recorded and your cameras and your microphones are off, and feel free to engage though through the chat. But if you have questions, particularly ones that we want to answer as together, we'll use the Q&A function, and that way we'll keep track of your questions, and we are going to come back to them at the end. We'll likely turn off the recording, and that will allow us to open up your microphones and we can have a discussion about those too. But please also refer to the chat to stay engaged.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for being here. My name is Stephanie Weinstein, and my colleague right over here next to me, um, Jen Hegan, and we're the Invasive-Wise education team with the Invasive Species Council of BC. I've been with the council for a few years. Actually, I think today is my 3-year anniversary, I'm pretty sure. And prior to this, I've worked as an environmental educator in parks and in various capacities around my home in Victoria, which is, yeah, I'm very grateful to be on the traditional territory of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. So I really love working with teachers and with students, and helping people to get connected to nature, to learn about local ecosystems and take action to protect it. And over to you, Jen, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Okay, yeah, quickly. I'm coming to you from the traditional territories of the Wet'suwet'en people in more north central BC, near the town of Smithers, where I've been here in the Bulkley Valley for about 20 years, doing lots of outdoor education, including school gardens and doing food security. So I've been with the council for a couple of years as well, and getting to know the world of virtual presentations and meeting people all over the province and about all the invasive plants and gardens, things that I don't get to enjoy in northern BC. Okay,
Great.
maybe Steph, you'll start with our slideshow.
Yes, I am going to get that queued up right now. Sorry, one second. And here we go, share sound.
Yeah, we'll have some video clips in here as well.
Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay, hope you can see that. So, yeah, we're really excited to be here today, and we know that it's a really busy time of year. That many people in school settings are interested in starting to work on school gardens with their students. So, we wanted to share with you some information and resources and activities that can help you as educators to inspire your students and to while helping to prevent the spread of invasive species. So we just had this kind of funny cartoon as a start, like thinking if anyone can relate to this. So some plants may not be armed, but they can still be dangerous, or at least give us a whole lot of extra work to try to control them. And today we'll hopefully be sharing information to help prevent this from happening. So before we get started, as we said before, so we're with the Invasive Species Council of BC, and as a provincial organization, we gratefully acknowledge the territories of the Indigenous peoples of Canada, where we live and work to maintain healthy ecosystems for all. And I encourage you to use the chat to share where you're coming from today. And also you may see a link in the chat that's a helpful website to learn more about the traditional territories in your region and throughout BC. So very quickly, a little bit about Invasive Species Council of BC. If you're not familiar with us already, we have been around for almost 20 years, and we're the largest provincial invasive species charity in Canada. And you can read our mission statement here: to take action to build healthy landscapes, habitats, and communities through education and responsible practices to prevent the spread of invasive species. Partnerships are a real key to the success of our work. And we work with many different organizations and groups, including governments and industry, regional invasive species organizations, Indigenous communities throughout BC, and youth and educators. So we thank you very much for being here and for being part of the important work that we do. And we also work very closely with these affiliates. So these are regional invasive species organizations throughout BC. And these are your experts on the ground in your region. So on our website, or you can Google your invasive species organization near you. And this has all the most up-to-date on the ground information about invasive species in your region. And many of really excellent educational programs and activities too. So we're very happy to be here today. It is May, which is officially Invasive Species Action Month in BC. You can see the website there. We've had some amazing activities and information and webinars throughout the month, and several more to come, including next week on whirling disease, which you may have heard of, closing down Yoho National Park and some other regions in BC because of this aquatic invasive. And also, I really wanted to point out for all of you here today on this topic of being plant-wise and school gardens, there was a webinar that's on our YouTube channel that's fantastic. If you want to get some more information about native and non-invasive plants and how they support pollinators and what pollinators need. So really, really good, great webinar by a professor from SFU, Dr. Elizabeth Ellie. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today, our objective is to empower you with knowledge and resources that create meaningful garden classroom experiences, but that also help to prevent the spread of invasive species. And by doing that, you are helping to support biodiversity. So what we'll be covering today is some basics, like what are invasive species and why does it matter? So those are things that are important to share with your learners. Some variety of activity ideas that you can do with students. An important resource called Grow Me Instead that shows non-native and native but non-invasive alternatives to invasive plants in the garden. We're going to give you a quick tour of our website so you can see where some of these resources are located. And we hope to be able to have Q&A and discussion unmuted or through the Q&A feature or through the chat. So just to start you off, we have this cute video of Thomas asking his wonder question. And these videos, there's a whole series of wonder questions, kids asking their questions, which are a great jumping off point for inquiry, ways to introduce topics to students. So why are invasive plants so pretty? Here we go.
My name is Thomas. My question is, why is invasive plants so pretty?
That's a great question. In fact, a lot of these plants were brought to BC because they're beautiful. It wasn't until that they were planted that we realized how quickly and aggressively they can grow. Invasive doesn't mean they're not pretty. It just means these plants are from far away, and when they get to BC, they can take over.
Great. So as Thomas mentioned, invasive plants are pretty. That's how they were introduced in the first place. That's how many of our invasives got here, is through the horticultural industry and people planting them or sharing them or buying them. And they are for sale. So these 6 plants shown here are some of the top invasive species for sale in garden centers in BC. This was a study done on the South Coast and in Kelowna. So curious if any of these are surprising to you, if you've seen them around in your area, maybe they're even in your school gardens, and it's okay. It is not your fault. It's very challenging to navigate this when they're for sale and they're promoted in our garden centers. So it puts the the burden on us as gardeners and as consumers to educate ourselves, to learn not to buy and plant certain species that are so harmful. So one activity idea is just knowing this is going on neighborhood walks to see how many of these you can find. And maybe there's even some in your own garden. So we're going to also kick off our presentation with a game. So we call this Weed Out the Invasives. So you can play this to support your outdoor garden learning. This could be played with students as a relay. So have two teams and have a whole bunch of photos from seed catalogs or our website, and just have them in a big pile. And then one person from each team has to run to the pile and select an invasive plant to weed out. So you're going to go and grab it. It's like you're weeding out the invasive species. And then they bring it back to their team, and the team decides if they should keep it weeded out or replant it. So maybe it's a native one, you want to run back and put it back in the pile and replant it. And then the next team member from the relay runs to weed out an invader. And you keep playing until everyone's had a chance or until there's no pictures left, and you can give points for each correctly weeded out invasive plant. So now it's your turn, and please use the chat so you can see it's a grid with numbers on the y-axis, letters along the x-axis. So combined, you can figure out which ones and put the letter and number combo that is an invasive that you would want to weed out. And I can give you a clue. There are 6 invasives. So everyone write in something. I see somebody put A3.
Yeah, you don't have to type all 6 in. Just you can do
Yeah.
one at a time as you notice them.
And extra points for participation. And I should say, we are going to have some prizes today. Some good prizes for skill testing questions. So I'll wait another moment for people to put in a guess or two, if any look familiar.
Nice.
Oh, I see more coming in. Excellent.
You guys are getting into the groove here.
I'm not going to tell you if you are right or wrong individually, but I'm going to give a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Oh my goodness, I see more things coming in the chat. Okay, 1 and half a quarter, an eighth. Okay, here we go. Ready? The big reveal. Oh, it's not advancing. There we go. So those 6 that are faded out. Oh, wait, there's only 5. Oh, wait, can I count? No, there are 6. Those are the invasives. So we weeded them out, and I think we could put the answers in the chat of what they are. Both the natives and the invasives that are there. But the invasives were going across butterfly bush, Japanese knotweed, second row common comfrey and common tansy, yellow flag iris, and myrtle spurge. So we're going to be learning more about some of these specific invasives. But anyway, that's a fun game there. And Jen, would you like me to stop sharing because it's your turn now, or do you want me to keep on?
Sure. I'll take over the
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing there. So congratulations thanks for participating.
Okay, so I'll just
so now we're going to be going into a little bit of some definitions about what some invasive species are and some terms. Jen, I can still see oh, that's mine. Okay, looks good. You're on.
Yeah, we see some nice graphics here and lots of terms to look at. Yes, well, now it's a good way to take a deeper dive into a subject with understanding the language. And this is not only good for us, but for teaching as well. So let's quickly go over some definitions of the keywords that we use in speaking about invasive species. And we will come to see how school gardens are actually great places to find examples of these terms and also why these definitions are important for us to understand and teach about. So we have lots of ways to describe species that come from away, depending on perhaps how they impact us and our ecosystems. And these terms can be discussed at length. We could spend the rest of this webinar discussing the nuances of them, and they've come in and out of favor over time, and also in different regions, they're used differently. But pay attention, because we are going to add a little more of a quiz as after this to sort of with a bit of a short game of also from here, from away. So I'll start off with native species, as this is kind of our benchmark to biodiversity and healthy habitats. And this is the one, and that is the fact that native species have evolved over thousands and thousands of years since glaciation, let's say in British Columbia. And so they're organisms that have adapted to local conditions like climate factors, predators, parasites, and disease, and therefore they're in balance. So that's the key word we want to get across, is that they're in balance. And like, for example, like our icons describing kinnikinick here, is that we can teach our students how so many parts of plants have an important value to animal life, including us. So the leaves are hosts to caterpillar stages of insects like butterflies. We, of course, have berries that come from the flowers to feed other animals, bears and birds. And the flowers themselves are quite significant for feeding our early arriving pollinators and insects. And then, of course, people always fit into this too, how we benefit from the medicinal properties, and our traditional ecosystem knowledge from Indigenous people have taught us the benefits of our native plants to us. But in contrast, then we have our definition of invasive species. And of course, it is one that is not native to a given area or introduced, and it may have been introduced intentionally or by accident. And the key is that they typically reproduce and spread quite quickly, sending our ecosystem out of balance. And by definition, invasive species are ones that have negative impacts, and so they harm the environment, our economy, and human and animal health. So here's a picture of the common comfrey, for example, which is an invasive plant likely to have arrived intentionally because of its medicinal properties to North America from Western Asia and Europe. But it's notoriously difficult to remove because it has the tendency to sprout from any part of the root or plant fragments, and it has a very large tap root that goes quite deep, hard to remove, but then that means it sucks lots of the nutrients out of the soil from the native plants. And then again, also toxic for being, then again, here's the harm part, is that it's toxic if ingested by people and animals. It just has medicinal properties when used externally. You have to be careful of this plant. So there's, our definition of an invasive species, but not all non-native or from away or introduced plants are invasive. So then many of them are ones that that we have in our gardens and our farms, and they're maybe called exotic or alien, and they really only thrive because they take human care and human management to succeed, and they don't end up spreading into our wild spaces and causing harm. Then another definition, though, which so many people are probably asking maybe by now, and likely our students will ask us this as well. So what's the difference between a weed and an invasive plant? And so I just thought maybe this definition I pulled off the internet is one of the best things to say, is that it's a plant considered undesirable in a particular situation, growing where it conflicts with human preferences, our needs, or our goals. So it's not doing so much harm to the ecosystem, but it's more of a value judgment. And we're learning all the time, though. We've learned recently that the presentation that Stephanie just talked about at the start of our Invasive Species Action Month from a plant expert, that maybe dandelions, if you have a monoculture of dandelions blooming early, well, maybe that's not the plant, that there's other native plants that the animals have adapted to have as early sources of pollen. So we're learning all the time about the impacts of, especially when they take over the monocultures. And the noxious weed, so if you say something's a weed, well, that's quite different than something being a noxious weed, which is, noxious is the designation for a plant that has been officially, like, legislatively designated as a problem, particularly, like, let's say in agriculture, and that requires treatment by landowners. now sort of diving into the biodiversity side and acting locally while thinking globally is exactly where school gardens can really make a difference. And having, let's say, pollinator-friendly school gardens can provide flowering plants at different times of year, particularly native plants, to offset the potentially challenging fact that local landscapes have less biodiversity in the invasive plants that are coming. I like this, the fact that just yesterday was Biological Biodiversity Day, and we have this great slide showing this balance that we're creating in our school gardens. That it's a great venue to learn about biodiversity. We're creating mini ecosystems, attracting a variety of plants and animal species, and by creating habitats for different creatures, students learn about the importance of diversity and sustaining that balance that we're trying to protect. So yes, school gardens are excellent places, nature spaces for observation, teaching, and taking action to become plant-wise, as we're going to discuss a bit more. And they're great places to learn and observe about some of those really interesting adaptations that plants have. And I like to tell students that there's sort of the superpowers of invasive plants when they have these really strong adaptations. And it's having their schoolyards and as a place to go look for these traits. And these would be traits like being prolific seed producers and spreaders. So introducing the concept of Velcro coming from birds, or many students might recognize that. So we can learn a lot from our plants around us. They establish themselves super quickly and thrive in many habitats, disturbed habitats, like we see with this knotweed having taken over the roadside because it got mulched up into many pieces. And also tansy ragwort being an example of how it, like knotweed, they just spread so effectively by plant pieces like the rhizomes, those underground stems, buds, roots, anything. And then they also lack natural predators because they have adaptations like spines, or maybe in the case of like Daphne and some other plants that have a toxic sap, so that they're not going to be eaten or picked by people, and they can continue reproducing and spreading. So as plant and gardens enthusiasts and educators, we need to be on the lookout for these plants and understanding then, of course, what the superpowers lead to and how they really throw our ecosystem out of balance by having that sort of monoculture effect. So here's a picture of some ivy that's really blocking out the sunlight to any other native plant as it got on the ground cover, and then allowing it to thrive and start growing up trees. We have pollinators suffer because they lose the variety of native food sources, and we have a decrease in soil and plant diversity from monocultures. So like I said, if the students are armed with some of these knowledge about some of these great adaptive traits to spread and the impacts of that, then let's send them out on this activity. We call it the Amazing Adaptations Hunt. And we have, from our website, we have the lesson called Amazing Adaptation Hunt. And we also have now a new publication where you can actually get a nice print copy to bring outside, this copy sheet outside with you with some other games. And it's a great activity to have like a scavenger hunt and having this checklist of adaptations that plants have, and see they can go themselves and see what they can find, how many they can find, and whether it leads to identifying any invasive plants. And also from our website version of this, we have a copy sheet of this in French too. So many of our resources, we've created copy sheets for bilingual French immersion classes. Okay, so maybe I will stop sharing because Steph's going to introduce this next video clip, actually.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. There we go. Thanks so much, Jen. That was really informative. And here is a video from one gardener to another on what it means to be plant-wise. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it.
Hi, I'm Julie, and I'm a master gardener. We gardeners are becoming aware that beyond designing a beautiful yard or growing our vegetables, we have a vital role to play as Earth stewards. We're beginning to understand that our gardens can provide habitat for wildlife, for everything from spiders to songbirds. And our little patches of beautiful flowers can be urban oases rich in nectar for our pollinators. So we can really make a difference to the biodiversity in our communities, which means in our world. So by carefully choosing the plants that we grow, and by removing the invasive species that don't belong in our gardens, we make an important contribution to the health of our planet for all our relations. Let's be plant-wise.
Oh, great. One thing,
Hi.
oops, there we go. Just to mention, I did notice that the pollinator was going to an invasive foxglove plant. So in case that, in case
We're learning
that,
all the time.
yeah, beautiful, but in my area, it has spread a lot. So yeah, this may be very obvious to those of you who are here or watching this after the fact. If it's preaching to the choir, the benefits of native plant gardens, but I just wanted to emphasize it here that there's many advantages to using plants native to your region because they are already adapted to the local climate conditions and once established are really low maintenance. So that's why they don't require additional inputs of fertilizer, compost, that type of thing, although they may grow better with that. And sometimes with changes in climate, with drought and stuff, they might need a little bit more water than they would have in the past. But in general, they're much less maintenance and less costly than other plants that are not native to the region. I have a native plant garden and I don't have to do any additional watering. I don't do anything. It just thrives. And it also, they support native wildlife. By using native plants, you're not spreading harmful invasive plants. And they're great opportunities for outdoor learning and also they're beautiful. And it's also part of a reconciliation effort. So learning about native plants, you can learn about traditional ecological knowledge, the medicinal uses, spiritual connections for Indigenous people in your area to those plants. And I just wanted to also show here, this is a study that was done about 6 years ago. It published in a very prestigious scientific journal by Desiree Narango. This is just the popular press picked it up. So this is just amazing study showing that in this case, it was Carolina chickadees, but they require a tremendous number of caterpillars in order to rear their offspring. And non-native plants did not cut it. So they were food deserts. So in my area, I see Japanese maples, they're beautiful. They never have birds on them. They never have insects on them. So those native trees and shrubs especially are, if you see lots of insects eating them, that's a good thing. That's providing food for other wildlife and especially birds, really important. And there's lots of great resources that can help you in native plant gardening. This picture here is just an example of a resource for the Lower Mainland. You might see in the chat some examples of other resources that can help you determine what native plants are important in your area and what habitat, shade, or what type of soils they need in order to really thrive. Okay, so now we're going to play a few games. So these are some activities that you can do with your students and a little bit to learn about some of the plants in BC. So the first game that we're going to play is called From Here, From Away. So plants in our garden might be from here, like this native plant garden photo, or from away. Many of the ornamental plants in Butchart Gardens or other gardens might not be invasive, but they might have been planted and derived from other parts of the world. So yeah, non-native plants, remember, they may or may not be invasive. So I'm going to show a picture of a garden plant. And what I would like for you to do is write in the chat if it's native, invasive, or non-invasive. Non-invasive meaning it's not native, but it's non-invasive. If you know the plant, even better. So we'll do a few of those, and then we're going to play a couple of other games as well. What's that, Jen?
Oh, I was going to say, if you're finding the right way to write not native, but not invasive, you can maybe type in quickly exotic.
There you go. Yes. If you're super competitive, you can put an N, an I, or an E.
E, there we
go. Okay, so here we go. First one. So is it native, invasive, or exotic? And what is it? And apologies if this is not growing in your region. It's hard when we have such a big and diverse province. So let's see what the chat is looking like. Ooh, very good, Amy. Native Salal. There we go. And it is Salal. Yeah, so that's common in coastal BC forests. It was actually introduced by David Douglas in 1828 to England, where it is an invasive plant. So just goes to show you, you have to, where love is in the eye of the beholder, I guess. And salal is really an important plant, not only ecologically, but it's an important traditional food plant for coastal First Peoples, wherever it grows. So those berries are harvested and dried into cakes, and so it's a food source throughout the year. And yeah, it's also used to line pit cooks, and also in modern flower arrangements worldwide. It's a huge industry taken from BC. All right, here's the next one. Any ideas about this one? There's so many daisies that look similar. I see Pam said invasive, and let's see, you're right. Very good. And yes, Kim, we will be talking about seed packets for sure. So this one is called oxeye daisy. It was first introduced from Europe in seed mixes, and it remains commonly sold in wildflower seed mixes and sold in garden stores, but it has many negative impacts. It quickly spreads and takes over in grasslands, meadows, and rangelands, and decreases available forage for wildlife and livestock. One plant can produce 26,000 seeds that survive in the soil for 20 years, and it is also classified as a noxious weed. So even though things are legislated as noxious weeds, they can still show up in wildflower seed mixes, which is a very big problem. But we'll get into that later. Okay, here's another one. This is our last from here from away. Oh, this one. Very good. See, like you guys are really on it here. Okay, so this is non-invasive. So these are, yes, you're right. Tina, awesome. So it's a hosta. So something cool about hostas, there are over 3,000 cultivars, 70 species, originally from Northeast Asia. They were introduced in the early 1800s in North America. I know that in my area, they're not, I can't even keep it in my garden because the deer devour it. So they're edible. So maybe that is partly why they're not invasive. So, okay, so now we're going to play a different game that you can also play with students. This comes from, we'll be showing you, Jen will be showing you later some of our teaching cards. So I'm going to give you clues that come from our teaching cards. I'm going to give them one at a time, and you can try to guess what species I'm speaking of. It is an invasive plant. And yeah, and then we'll see, you could do it so that for every clue your students get, they get a point, and you try to get as few points as possible till you guess the right species and also show the photo. Okay, so here we go. When in bloom, to move things around so I can see this. When in bloom, I have many tiny white star-shaped flowers that produce many seeds, up to 10,000 per plant. Oh, chickweed, good guess. Baby's breath.
What's the origin of chickweed? I don't know.
Okay, let's see, another baby's breath. Next clue. After I flower, I break off and roll like a tumbleweed, moving to new areas where I outcompete native grasses that are preferred by wildlife and livestock. We've got people agreeing on Bravy's breath there. Okay, next clue, a giveaway. I'm popular flower and flora bouquets, especially for weddings. And here we go. There you can see.
I liked Amy's suggestion of chickweed because that's how I see my chickweed with these beautiful little tiny white flowers.
Awesome. And yeah, and here is just a picture of our teaching card where these clues came from. So just we'll be showing you these teaching cards. They're great resource to use in games and also to help with identification of plants in the garden. Okay, another resource and another activity you can do with students. This can be done for any invasive species, not just in the garden. We have this wanted for crimes against biodiversity template. You can make your own. It's a classic and fun activity. I certainly did not make it up. There's many different versions of this out there. So I'm going to do it as a little game once again for you to guess. So here we go. Here's the crime. Toxic sap that may cause skin rashes, nausea, swelling of the tongue, and even coma. I've never heard of it. I don't know of anybody that's happened to, but apparently that is a possibility. And it forms dense monocultures in the forest understory. And no, the plants are not the villains. That is true. They're just doing their thing. They're doing what they're really good at. And in their native locations, they are in balance with the ecosystem. So they are the sad victims of human activities. Giant hogweed, Daphne laurel, great ideas. Okay, I'm going to give you the picture. Here we go. And one of you has it right already, so I'm going to just share that. So Daphne laurel, yeah, that's one on the South Coast on Vancouver Island. It's really common in gardens. The seeds are spread by rats and by birds, and they've made their way into forests where they can really form dense monocultures. And here's a picture of removal effort. So small plants can be just plucked with gloves. They're very easy, little seedlings. Larger plants, you do have to be very careful and wear gloves and goggles just to protect yourself from the sap.
Sometimes with students, we do it more virtually, but you can do it in your classrooms or out in the school garden. Is you do lookalikes, like what might look like an invasive and what looks like a native plant. And well, in this case, we make the comparison with the leaf and the bit of the glossiness of the leaf to rhododendrons between Daphne and rhododendrons. Even though rhododendrons aren't a native plant, or very few that we find. So anyways, that's just another idea. Is the lookalike concept is a good one to play.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jen. So these aren't really lookalikes, but this comes from a resource that we have that we'll be sharing with you called Grow Me Instead. And so here's another game that you can use based on the brochure and the information on our website for Grow Me Instead. So which one should I plant? So number 1 or number 2? One of them is an invasive that causes harm. One of them is either a native plant or a non-invasive. And row number 2. Okay. Very good. So yes, number 1 is bachelor's button, often found in wildflower seed mixes as well. And number 2 is called showy daisy. And there we go. Do not grow bachelor's buttons and grow showy daisy instead. Similar growing conditions. Okay, now we have the last game for you here. Which one should I grow? One of them is both growing very well. You can see in kind of rocky outcrops, dry conditions.
Rock garden plants.
Yeah, both garden plants, exactly. But one causes harm and one does not. And I'll give you the names now. That helps. Any idea which one is one you would want to grow? Yeah, we've got a bunch of very knowledgeable people here. So broadleaf stonecrop is the one we would grow instead of leafy spurge. Leafy spurge is, it's actually toxic to humans, livestock, and wildlife. And it has a latex, the sap, when it contacts the skin, has these toxic properties. And it has something I just learned while putting this presentation together. Its root system is enormous. It has a taproot that can grow 9 meters deep. And it also is allelopathic, which means that it produces toxins in the soil that prevents other plants from growing. So it helps it to create those monocultures and to spread. And it is not eaten by wildlife, so further giving it that advantage to outcompete.
I believe that term allelopathic, which is always interesting to teach our kids big syllable words. Hawkweed and knapweeds have that trait as well. So we see that's why they're taking over our pastures and haylands.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool thing to learn about, that plants can do that they can.
Oh yeah, walnut, yeah.
Yeah, they're able to do that. Yeah, there's a lot of invasive plants actually do have allelopathy, and walnuts. Yep. Very cool. All right. So shifting gears now. So just thinking about some of the things that we've already seen in this presentation so far, maybe some questions to ask yourself before you purchase a plant or before you plant it. So first of all, to find out, is this plant considered invasive in my area or elsewhere, maybe elsewhere in the region or elsewhere it might have certain properties, even if it's not considered invasive here right now. With climate change, things are moving and things can become invasive. So one great source of information for that is looking at our website or on the website of the regional invasive species organizations. So does this plant have certain traits that would allow it to outcompete others? So some of those superpowers, these amazing adaptations that they have, that could help it to spread in my garden beyond. So if it's a vine, if it has a deep taproot, if it's spiny, those are some kind of clues that it might have some adaptations that could potentially make it spread. What do I need to know from my local nursery or garden center? So those are some questions that you might have to ask them, but often they might not be so knowledgeable. So a native plant garden, definitely yes. Others, like if it's Home Depot, I would maybe look elsewhere for more information. But your local nursery or garden center could be a great source of information and questions that you might have. So, and is there an alternative plant that I can use instead of one with the potential to become invasive? And so along those lines, we wanted to share with you this resource called Grow Me Instead. This is available on our website. I will take you there in just a moment. It's an interactive website where there's also a brochure that's downloadable. So it just gives these commonly planted invasive garden plants that we could have an alternative to plant instead, that has similar growing conditions and characteristics, like a ground cover or a shrub or something similar. So here we go. I'm going to quickly show you the Grow Me Instead part of our website. So you can see bcinvasives.ca, then you go to what you can do, and then you go to Grow Me Instead. And here we go. So let's say bachelor's buttons. Say I have bachelor buttons in my garden and I want to get rid of it, but what else could I put instead? So it gives some ideas. So here's that picture that I showed you earlier, showy daisy. And then it gives you, okay, it's a native plant. Some of them are not native, but they are not invasive. And it gives you a description. It gives some special features. So it's bear smart. So if you live in an area with bears, it's not going to have berries that attract it. Moisture requirements. So this is a fantastic resource. Also, you can download this brochure and print it out, or it's available for sale on for like 25 cents. If you wanted to get one for each student in your class, it's really handy as a little scavenger hunt. So I'm going to go back
on a neighborhood walk. You might see what's crept its way out to the sidewalks.
Exactly. So some things that you could do. Exactly. So you could use it on a neighborhood plant walks or scavenger hunts. It can be used for garden planning. It can also be used for awareness campaigns. So what some students like to do is, talk to their local nurseries or the big box stores. You could go, if you have a Home Depot or Lowe's, you could make a little field trip, bring your Grow Me Instead guides, find out what they're selling, and then perhaps write letters or try to talk to the person in charge of the nursery and let them know this is invasive. We're spending millions of dollars trying to get rid of English ivy. Maybe you shouldn't be selling it. And there we go. English ivy for sale, flat for $45, which is just very disheartening. But yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, but we can start by just learning ourselves and making a difference in our own school gardens, in our own backyards. So as Kim mentioned before, wildflower seed mixes are something to avoid in general. So they often have these, if you are reading, whether it's a seed mix or just a packet of certain seeds, if you see some of these descriptions, low maintenance, easy to grow, thrives in harsh conditions, vigorous bloomer, fast growing, those are all red flags. These are indications that this is going to be a plant that has invasive characteristics. And also native to where? Canadian wildflowers. So is a wildflower that's growing in Ontario the same as something growing in BC? Even northern BC and southern BC, very different. So where is it native to? And most wildflower seed mixes do not have a species list. And look at there's bachelor's buttons and probably oxeye daisy right there on that package. So it's very beautiful, but yeah, it's harmful. And also the pollinators I just saw on that webinar, they don't even like bachelor's buttons. So there you go. And so there was a study that was done, and they analyzing numerous packages of wildflower seed mixes. And I have the statistics here. Let me just see. I think it was, in the University of Washington, they grew out 19 seed mixture packets to see what was in them. The lowest percentage of invasives in the seed mix was 28%. Some of the seed mixes that they grew out were 100% invasive species, even noxious weeds that are federally regulated. So these are 6 species here that are often found in wildflower seed mixes, including giant hogweed, which is, you see the equipment that they need to deal with it. Like, it's extremely dangerous. So best thing to do is get some seeds native to your area and make your own wildflower seed mix if you're doing seed bombs or other activities like that. Things that you can do with your students. So look at those seed packets before you're doing planting in the garden and investigate them. Look at those slogans like I showed you, the red flags. That's a great project, looking at communication and language arts. And then you can make your own seed mix for your area. And looking at the ingredients. So West Coast Seeds is amazing. They put all of their ingredients on their website for their different blends. And they also give a warning saying, this might not be native in your area. Seeds that are native in one part of the Pacific Northwest, if you're in a special, like a Garry oak ecosystem or some microhabitat, it could be invasive in your area. So you can't just look at a blanket statement. You need to do a little bit of legwork. Perfect job for students to do a little bit more research on. And this is over to you, Jen. Or is this still me? I can't remember. I think this is you.
Yeah, it's me. And then I'm going to go into our webpage. So yeah, stop screen sharing and I'll take over.
Okay. Great. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah. I'm getting and captivated by all your facts and everything too, Steph. You're always coming up with more, the more I learn from you all the time. So yeah, I'll just go back to our PowerPoint there. There, did everyone, do you see the slide? Protect your gardens and surroundings. I just we want to just pass on some tips when we're uh, thinking about school gardening and new gardens in particular. Perhaps often we're adding to school gardens is that it's a place where often we're offered transplants from other gardens, but I found over the years it's really important to take the time to put those transplants in a bucket of water so you can soak the roots, and that separates out unwanted roots and rhizomes of the hitchhiking plants that come from another garden. So I've found is a very nice tip. And also when you're adding new soil or compost to these beds, allow it to germinate and weeds to sprout before you go in and plant your vegetable crops or your other plants in there. Particularly, you might find a lot of that pigweed in there, and that's just really easy to pull out, and kids can actually taste that and eat that. So giving yourself time to germinate the soil is a really good idea. And then yeah, make it an activity to stay on top of those seed pods and berries. So study them, learn from them, observe them. But then if you think that anything might come from a potential invasive shrub, like not in the gardens, but maybe in your landscaping of your schools, is when you should remove those seed pods and berries from those invasive landscaping plants. And then don't compost anything that we know is from an invasive plant, or we're doubting if it's a super spreader, because even though it seems intuitive to put vegetation in a garbage, or check with your municipality of where you can put that safely somewhere else besides just dumping or in the compost, because plant pieces don't really and seeds can often survive compost. Compost don't get so hot as to kill them off. And I think it's good for us just to understand really like the sort of the dilemma of the horticulture harm and the help, and how the invasive spread, and how we can teach this is that we look for the fact that they spread so rapidly by their roots and stems. So what we can do to counter that is to keep the fast growing plants under control, like keep them in containers, cut and replace them, like that mint plant. We don't mind mint so much, but we've maybe learned to keep that in a bit of its root system contained. And then, of course, just look for those seed heads forming, and to observe how those seeds are going to get distributed, and take those seed pods and dead flower heads off before they turn into seed pods and berries. And then to actually understand how invasive spread by directly in being introduced them to the garden. So as we've just gone through is to choose your plants widely, use Grow Me Instead and PlantWise knowledge before you accept plants into that school garden. And then, also the dumping of waste, like I just said, invasive plants in their entirety have to be looked after in the garbage. And of course, the schoolyards and neighboring parks and school gardens is a great place for kids to get their hands dirty, which we would love to see more of, and to be active using those gross motor skills. So it's invasive plant knowledge and protecting biodiversity is a great way to take action and have the tools on hand, like the gloves and the shovels and disposal tarps for collecting those plants. And remember that you're telling the students to take all parts of the plants from the site. Take the time beforehand to contact your regional district or municipality government to get that support, and the invasive species organizations for your area. They're super knowledgeable, and we can help you connect to the actual staff members that can really give you some on the ground support for that. And yeah, include us in your support network too. We're not going to necessarily, we can't be there on the ground for you. We'll just maybe help you sleuth through the logistics of doing an invasive plant removal. But we could maybe offer you a sticker, like this little nice graphic here, for when you need a little bit of a reward or a bribe for your students and their hard work. We have Invasive-Wise stickers to offer you. Yeah, we're getting near to the end of our time, so I'm just going to do a really sort of quick hang on to your seat tour of our website for educators, because this is where you can dive deeper into getting the copies of resources and learn a lot more about what we have. So if you go to the Learning tab is where we have our For Educators page. And that page will bring you right to where we have links to describing how you can sign up for the Invasive-Wise education program and book virtual presentations from Stephanie and I for your group or your students. And maybe I'll go back to that after we sort of look at the activities that are on this page a bit more closely. You'll scroll down, you'll see this icon for teaching cards. So as Steph mentioned, when we were playing our sort of Who Am I games, we have a whole collection of 50 plants and animals, and you can download the large PDF file of all 50, or you scroll through and choose the ones that you maybe are looking for your area, or we can help you select them for your area by alphabetical order. And let's just go into the blueweed one because it's up here. You'll get a nice big sort of letter-sized picture to have available for your games or your scavenger hunt, or just even talking about the plant. You have a nice picture to show, and then 3 interesting facts that can be used in student-led Who Am I games or From Here From Away games, scavenger hunts. And then I'll just get out of teaching cards. Scrolling down some more, this is where we have about 15 or so more of really good in-depth lessons and activities in those lessons to bring to your student group. And you can choose it, go through them by grade and subject area, or if you want something a bit more physical or outdoor, indoor. And just right at the top here, we have one, the From Here From Away concept that we've talked about. And it's great for all ages. Like we have right at the top here, K to 12, even adults really enjoy this. We do this at professional development workshops for teachers, where we download this activity. And this lesson also has a video to help you explain how to use it. So in quite a few of our lessons, we have videos, which is a nice, really accessible way to get to know the games quite quickly. But I'm just sort of scrolling down quickly to show you every lesson has documents to download. And From Here From Away, Stephanie made this great collection a few years ago of native animals and plants with their nice little bits of trivia and a key to knowing which ones are maybe exotic introduced versus actual invasives. Or then again, we have those terms pest or weed. So that's a great way to elaborate and teach on those definitions. I'll just go back out to our main page of activities. I like this one. I'm going to scroll down to don't pick up hitchhikers in the garden in the fall. We're talking about seed pods and seed heads. Well, this one goes in depth about how you can have seeds stick to your clothing, and students can do that and have a bit of a math and science activity around traveling seeds on clothing. So I'll scroll back up to here where you can find out how to sign up with Invasive-Wise education. We have a nice descriptions of what the program offers and another link to our virtual presentations and how to get in touch with Stephanie and I directly through this page. And then you can get onto our email list and stay attuned to all sorts of the resources that we're coming out with. Which, last but not least, on the BC Invasive webpage, we have this banner that's always there, and it has the store, which you can find a new publication hot off the press under our publications that we've produced for the specifically for the outdoor learning store that's now hosting some of our resources like the aquatic invaders and this booklet that goes along with their invasive species action kit. And it's a really good simplified version of many of our activities and games that you could just do with no materials, just out on site. You can bring this booklet with you and you're good to go backpack and get some great ideas about what you can do to do observations. You'll see that many of our activities are about observing and encouraging students to really just get to know their place and what is maybe the usual plants to see versus maybe something that's new, whether it's on their walk to school or around anywhere. And that's sort of like the progressive steps to becoming really invasive-wise. Also in this booklet, we have that template for the wanted sign that you can do for connecting to community. And yeah, I know we're getting close to 4:30 here. The only other thing I want to show you is it's very hidden. It's under follow us. We have these nice little social media icons, and we have the YouTube channel there. And YouTube, I won't keep going all the way down it because YouTube is where you'll find playlists, and we have a whole education education playlist. Maybe I shouldn't scroll too much, but we have kids questions, and we have ability to find all our great videos through our YouTube. Okay, so I think we're pretty much at the end, because we want to maybe leave some time if you have any questions. I've really been following too well. I know through the chat you've been engaging, but we want to thank you very much for coming, and those are our emails, addresses, and yeah, Steph,